可以人數夠開會，咁我哋可唔可以請啲客人入嚟咁我哋就可以開會。
We've already formed a quorum. Please invite our guests to come in. Thank you, Mr. Pei and your colleagues. I won't introduce you one by one anymore. This is our 5th public hearing on Chapter 7 of Report Number 60, Preventive Education and Enlisting Public Support Against Corruption. I hope that this will be the last session. Would you like to say something first? Or would you like to speak after we have concluded? It's up to you. Well, if possible, I will speak after the session closes. All right, then I'll give you 5 minutes then. All right, then we'll start with our public hearing. Paul, you'll be the first to ask questions. Yuk-man is otherwise engaged and will not be able to attend. Mr. Kenneth Leung is in the United Kingdom. He is on a duty visit on behalf of the PAC. Alan Leung is coming. He is otherwise engaged. Paul, you'll be the first one, and then Hakkan Leung Sing. Thank you, Chairman. If I may refer you to the latest paper, Gen 22. If you have the paper with you, I will take you through the paper. Which page, please? Let's start from page 3. Yes? Mr. Pei, you see, this is an anti-corruption convention paper by the LIAW. You'll see the heading, implementation by Hong Kong, and then for every amendment legislation, there's an introduction. Would you please turn over the pages to page 14, about 14. Yes, Paul. Under international cooperation, there are certain convention provisions that have to be amended and administrative arrangements have to be made. There's an introduction. You see Articles 43 to 50. Do you see it? Yes. Mr. Pei, yes. 44, extradition. 46, mutual legal assistance. And then 45 and 47, transfer of sentenced persons and criminal proceedings. And then in particular, Article 48 is about close cooperation among states parties. That is what states parties have to do. Do you see that, Commissioner? Yes? Mr. Pei, would you please turn over the pages to page 99? It's about mainland liaison. A document dated November 2009. Is this what you previously referred to? That is, your department has to carry out a review in relation to Community Relations Consultative Committee. Is this the document that you refer to? On page 99, you see a paper issued in 2009, about a year or two later than the Anti-Corruption Convention under the UN. I believe this is for the Community Relations Consultative Committee, is to consult the members. For the document prepared for the Community Relations Consultative Committee, basically it's not related to the paper previously submitted to the LIAW. Our paper is basically about corruption prevention, and our department just wanted to consult the members of the consultative committee on whether or not legislation would be required. Well, after Hong Kong joined the convention, up to the issuance of that paper, in between, be it the ICAC or the Community Relations Department, any other documents on liaison with the mainland? Commissioner, as far as I understand, no. So this paper dated November 2009 was the first paper from the Community Relations Department to consult the Consultative Committee on Community Relations in relation to mainland liaison, right? Well, for this paper on page 99, it said that as early as the 1980s, we started anti-corruption work with the mainland. Review and way forward. So we did not start our work from this paper. Understood. Paul? Be it the commissioner or the director, they should not worry. When I ask you about papers, don't think that I want some explanation from you. I just want to understand the background. May I refer you to page 102. Here you see mainland liaison, new strategies under the new position. Before that, we have new position of mainland liaison work. For new strategies under the new position, new work is to be done. And then you see collaboration with the mainland authorities. That is what the ICAC as a whole and the Community Relations Department would have to do. I'd like to know, is this the only document for discussion with the Community Relations Consultative Committee with proposals and conclusions? Director, yes, as far as the Community Relations Department is concerned, that's the only paper. Before that, we did not have any paper. For mainland liaison, although we set up in 1997 a mainland liaison group, not much work was done. As time advanced and the overall environment changes, we formally issued this paper to consult the committee. Paul? Previously, you briefly introduced a number of pieces of legislation to us. For example, Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance, Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, and their amendments. For the ICAC itself, apparently you have not, and in actual fact you did not amend any pieces of legislation as a result of the UN Convention, Anti-Corruption Convention. Is that correct? Mr. Pei, to implement the UN Anti-Corruption Convention, the ICAC ordinance was not consequentially amended. In the second arrow, under the second arrow in the middle, you see the position of the CPG. other provisions of the convention. Apart from the 3 pieces of legislation amended, which were related to law enforcement, all other provisions can, through existing laws and administrative measures, be implemented. Well, we know that the essence of the paper is that for mainland liaison, you would follow the major direction and the trend, so to speak, after signing the convention in relation to mutual collaboration, and appropriate adjustments and arrangements were made. I'd like to seek the view of the Commissioner on this. Do you agree that the ICAC, as a statutory body but not a part of the government, insofar as your powers and duties are concerned, you have to act in accordance with the laws? Commissioner? Absolutely. We have to act with a statutory basis. Paul? Well, law enforcement has to be in accordance with our laws, covering extradition, prosecution, etc. You have to act in accordance with the laws. Administratively and concerning the use of resources, should you adhere to the ICAC ordinance? Commissioner, for the use of resources, whatever the Commission needs to do, will, number 1, strive for resources, and number 2, deploy resources. As for resources, we will have to apply to the SARG. Every year we have a budget and we need a fund allocation, and if there's any manpower adjustment, we'll have to seek funding as well. We're monitored by the SARG. Paul, well, this has nothing to do with Mr. Pei because he's new to the post. Theoretically, if there are major changes in the use of resources, strictly speaking, the ICAC ordinance should be reviewed and, if necessary, be amended as well. Commissioner, of course, if the ICAC responsibilities are to be changed tremendously, and if we have new duties to cope with, we of course have to amend the ordinance. As for the application of the UN Convention to Hong Kong, as I said, back then, the whole SARG considered comprehensively what should happen after Hong Kong has followed the mainland in joining the convention. In the implementation of the convention, what amendments had to be made. I understand that at that time there was a comprehensive review, and we also sought legal advice. And the 3 ordinances in relation to law enforcement had to be amended. As for the other provisions, we can implement them by way of administrative measures and existing provisions in law. Were there major changes in resources, then take, for example, the Community Relations Department. For anti-corruption resources, if they were to be used non-locally or in tasks not really related to Hong Kong. Commissioner, do you understand what Mr. Paul there was asking you? Mr. Chairman, the UN Anti-Corruption Convention was to be extended to Hong Kong, and the ICAC was the designated body to be responsible for implementing the convention. The SARG understood that. It understood that the ICAC had to take up that task. As that was our task, we had to make arrangements within our resources, and a certain portion of our resources would have to be mobilized for that purpose. According to my rough estimation, to implement the convention, the percentage of overall resources of the ICAC or of the Community Relations Department was actually very small. The percentage was very small. Well, Paul adopted a macro point of view, a legal point of view, in leading you into this value for money examination. In paper 22, from the legal point of view, was there any contravention? You made a clear explanation, but Paul was asking about allocation of resources because you were actually using resources that were previously not used for that purpose, and resources were then channeled to non-local use. And Paul was asking about value for money. So during that period, for this $150 million allocated to your department, $150 million. That should be used in Hong Kong, but you used some of the money for homeland relationship work. Will local work in Hong Kong be affected?
For every year, the ICAC is given an allocation from the government for its work, and the convention, Hong Kong being a signatory, we do have to carry out the work that is prescribed in the convention. And in our allocated funds from the government, we will have to allocate some of the funds to carry out this relevant work. As for the exact percentage, I do not have the information here. Can you provide to us the information after the meeting? Yes, definitely. But I remember the percentage being a small one. And also, I feel that even after being signatory to the International Convention, in our community work, in gaining community support for probity, promotion and education, there is no adverse effect to it. And also, in the relevant work that we conduct, it is not like we are unilaterally trying to help another party, but rather we benefit in the process as well. For instance, for some of the more advanced countries around the world, they have certain investigative measures or legislation and principles. Through exchange with them, we actually are learning from them. If I can just raise an example, forensic accounting. We didn't used to have forensic accounting, but because a lot of cases now pertain to commercial crimes and private companies, and these cases are on the increase. A few years back, we have applied for funds to develop this particular capability, and that is forensic accounting. So this is not unilateral. We are not only exporting expertise, but we are also learning as well. Paul? Well, this is the focus, as you all understand. We have joined the convention. It is a fact, and of course we need to allocate resources for carrying out the work, but the ICAC is a statutory body, and it will have to follow the law in terms of its allocation of funds and resources. This is not the Snowden case where it is can be more ad hoc. You will have to, as a statutory body, will have to be more restrictive in your allocation of funds because you are governed by a statute, and like other departments of the government, which can have perhaps more flexibility and interchangeability of resources. And at the time of formulating the statute for ICAC, the International Convention was not signed by Hong Kong yet. Now, I would know whether there was no amendment to the said ordinance, and whether that is the case. Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman. Indeed, the statute or the ordinance was not amended after Hong Kong being a signatory to the International Convention. I confirm that. All right, following Mr. Chair's angle of questioning, we are looking from a legal angle at your work for probity promotion and education. And it is true that you are not given additional resources, even though after joining the convention, you have been given more work, and therefore you have had to do with spreading and reallocation of your existing vote of resources. That was Paul's point just now, and the legal point as well, if you can go back and think through that. Now, Mr. Pei, we have to compile a report, and the report will have to be forward-looking. And if you can give us a clearer explanation, we will have more insight in preparing the report. This is not a criticism of the ICAC, but rather in our evaluation of cost effectiveness and value for money. This is our consideration. Yes, Mr. Chairman, in terms of value for money, after we have started implementation of the International Convention, where there are additional work involved, we have absorbed that. Actually, in the previous hearing, we have already said that in the past few years, for our Community Relations Department, we have actually cut staff. But also in our previous meeting concerning our staffing, we are on target. And that is to say, the said department is being more productive than before, if that is an angle in understanding value for money. Yes, we will try to understand the situation from your point of view. Harkin? Yes. If I can ask the Commissioner for information. First of all, on the area of education, page 18, Schedule 3. Now this schedule is about the education provided to the community. I'm looking at 2.35, para 2.35. It is the audit recommendations, and it says that there may be a need for more provide preventive education talks to various parties. And my question is, do you agree with this response from your department concerning the prevention or preventive education talks to officials after they have joined the administration? And it says here that from the response of the ICAC that you seem to be in a more reactive role. You seem to be waiting for the officers to enroll or not enroll. Is that true? Well, actually, for preventive education and preventive education talks, we will have to have the officers or other participants to enroll voluntarily. We will have to get the voluntary enrollment or acceptance of the departments. In fact, we have a very close liaison with CSB, in 2007 or 08, we have already started a integrity officers role. And for the role of the integrity officers, they will look at their own department and they will be looking into any needs for preventive education, this ethics officer. But there are some departments, for various reasons, they have less participation in this kind of preventive education. And there is a list of 14 bureaus and departments, and these are policy-making bureaus such as the Office of the CE, the Office of the CS, etc. And the number of staff there is small, and because they're rather short-handed, it's very difficult for them to enroll for the individual staff. But even so, we have annual talks, for example, for the relevant legislation or ordinance concerning inappropriate behavior, for instance, of civil servants, etc., and we notice that they do participate in such talks. Yes. If there can be some explanation from the auditor on 2.35 on the audit recommendations. You understand Mr. Chan's question, is that right? This is your recommendation, the audit's recommendations, and why is that? Can you give us some background? Yes, I'm looking at Schedule 3. These pertain to departments and bureaus which have received more complaints against them. And the ICAC have identified these as their main departments or bureaus of focus. And we have gone through 5 to 6 years of records to look at the coverage of these departments and bureaus. For some of them, we have looked at, in consideration of their staff number and their enrollment, we have, therefore, we understand the reason why there have been less enrollment. But on the other hand, if the ICAC can go one step further, they can perhaps be more proactive and increase the enrollment of these departments. So this is actually not a criticism, but rather a recommendation. And the list is in Table 3 under Preventive Education provided for top 10 departments, page 21. Now, if you can look at Table 3 again, Mr. Commissioner, there are 2 departments which are particularly low in enrollment in the past 5 years. I'm looking at the Lands Department from 208 to 88, 09, 246, 2010, 122, etc., total 793. And Correctional Services Department, likewise, a total of 1,223 over the past 5 years. But on the other hand, the complaints or reports of these 2 departments are really in the upper or middle upper range in terms of the incidence of complaints. Now, if the ICAC, in promoting such education, facing such departments with low enrollment, how do you encourage them to enroll more frequently? When you also note that for these 2 departments, the opportunity for complaints or graft is more probable, for instance, for Lands Department, and how do you avoid this kind of possible misunderstanding among the people of Hong Kong? They should enroll themselves even more. Why is it so low?
And even for the Fire Services Department, the figures are on the low side. So can the director offer some explanation on those 3 departments? For the police, 32,000 odd. Number of complaints, 311. Lands Department, 3,700 odd people, 65 complaints. So perhaps you should answer Mr. Chan's question by telling us whether you have been proactive enough or you're too passive. In fact, we're proactive in our action. Targeting government departments, we would examine the number of reports of the operations department and then contacted the departments concerned. For various reasons, there were difficulties in making arrangements with certain departments. Let me deal with the Correctional Services Department first. You see the number of staff members there. In fact, the CSD was very active in joining our programs. Their department head is the chairman of a dedicated group on that, and they also organize their own training programs on top of ICAC training programs. As members said, CSD colleagues faced more temptation, but given our resources, and there are so many government departments to take care of, the CSD had their own training programs. That is, after we had told them how to train their own people, they would organize internal talks within the CSD, and the number of participants is not reflected here. Upcoming, they've also asked us to arrange talks for their staff at different levels, and we'll do that in different stages. We did liaise with the Lands Department because of various reasons they were unable to make the arrangements. Upon reading this report, they had contacted us, and upcoming we'll have many such talks. Yes, please continue to ask questions. We have plenty of time. May I refer you to the audit recommendations? Which paragraph, please? 2.35. The Director of Audit recommended that preventive education talks be provided to politically appointed officials after they have joined the administration. For the newly politically appointed officials, although 2 training sessions had been organized, we could see that these politically appointed officials were changing all the time. What about the new officials? Did you remind them? In terms of preventive education, have you organized any courses for them? Director, he was referring to paragraph 2.35, bracket C. Yes, I noted that. Apart from the 2 sessions mentioned by Mr. Chan, we've contacted the office of the CS4 administration. We're now making arrangements. As the Honourable Member mentioned, there were new appointees. So we're making the arrangements. But the new appointees do not assume office on the same day, so we have to make different arrangements. Commissioner, would you need to talk to the CE? That's his question. Was that his question? Well, I'd like to ask the Commissioner whether the CE had joined such preventive education courses. During the last 2 talks we organized, the CE did not come. Commissioner, do you think that the CE has the need to acquire more knowledge in this regard? I'm very willing to provide information to him. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to another part. Can I ask a question here? This is related to Mr. Paul's question just now. Mr. Chan asked about manpower and resources. You got less manpower and less resources. So even for the 10 government departments, less work was done. Commissioner, we ask so many questions because we would like to bring you to this core issue. We have a worry here. Can you explain to us? Was it that you had become passive and preventive education had been affected? Although only a small sum of money was spent elsewhere, you could have put in more effort in terms of preventive education. You should have done more. In this regard, can you answer our query? Because the previous 2 questions are related to this. Did you have any resource problem such that you were unable to do some work? Mr. Chairman, it's not because of resources. Table 3 sets out 10 departments. If you read the controlling officer's report, which we previously submitted to you, every year 20 to 30,000 civil servants were trained, no less than that, because we didn't just provide training to a few departments, we provide training to all government departments. But for these departments, problems were observed. We're not criticizing you. We just want to find out the truth, the fact. Was there such a fact? No, not because of resources. It's because of the arrangements of the departments concerned. Every year the departments told us how many new recruits they had and how many officers would be promoted, how many of them would need training and so forth, and we would organize training courses for them. We would like to look forward. Hakan? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to go to table 12 of the report. Is about the number of inquiries received. Which paragraph, please? Just the table, Mr. Chairman, is paragraph 3.17. Mr. Chairman, if you read the table, you see that in the past few years, the number of inquiries received by regional officers had dropped from 3,012 cases in 2008 to 2,304 in 2012. I'd like to know why the number of inquiries or complaints received by regional officers have been on the low side. For New Territories Southwest and New Territories Northwest, the number of inquiries received was particularly low. For NT Southwest, 176 in 2012, and NT Northwest, 93 only. Was it that the usage rate of the regional officers was on the low side? Director, all along we've been observing the number of reports and inquiries received by regional officers. We observed a trend. For example, Hong Kong West and Islands received the lowest number of inquiries. In fact, that office is quite invisible. You may not even see it when you pass by it. In Wan Chai, we have a Hong Kong East office because of its location with more people there. And then for the new territories, the usage rate was rather low. Our colleagues did try to find out the cause, but that's rather difficult. Those who lodged complaints there might not be living in the districts concerned, and those living in the districts concerned might not lodge complaints there. Up to this moment, we've not found out any scientific correlation. For Hong Kong West, 244 in 2012, less than 1 per day. One office is on the ground floor of a commercial building in KWAN, $83,000 per month. Are you referring to paragraph 3.18? Is it the Hong Kong West office, including that for islands? Yes. Mr. Chairman, with such a high rental level, if the office is not even receiving 1 case per day, is it really a waste of resources? I'd like to have a response from the director. And then another office received many inquiries. Kowloon East and Sai Kung, which received 617 inquiries in 2012. Where's that office? What's the rent? Chairman, why am I asking this question? Is it that the location, if the location is best and the rent is most expensive, it would be best? Well, just now I refer you to the other office in a commercial building at a rental of $83,000. It received less than 1 inquiry per day. Director, the Kowloon East Sai Kung Regional Office received more inquiries because of one reason. There's a hotline in that office. So very often, when people dial the hotline, they would be channeled to the office. So the number of inquiries received was more. Anyway, I agree with the audit and the honourable member that the Hong Kong West Islands office is actually very small. The rent is high because it's in the central area of KWAN. We did review the situation. We tried to see, given the location of that office, how should we handle that? Does the director agree that adjustments need to be made for certain offices? These offices may not need to be on the ground floor, or they may move to government offices or complexes in order to save resources. As the director said, in some cases, people don't go personally to these officers, so they just dial the hotline. We're comprehensively reviewing our offices. Our New Territories East is precisely in a government complex. Its services have not been affected. Therefore, upcoming, there's an exercise to look at these regional officers. For Hong Kong East, if there's to be a new government complex, if the location is appropriate, we'll move there. According to the audit report, we may have to specially pay attention to the Hong Kong West Regional Office. As for ground floor premises, they are more visible. We hope that members of the public can easily see our office and come to lodge complaints. This Hong Kong West office is very small because of the high rental. It's just to facilitate receipt of complaints and inquiries. If you look at our office colleagues, they actually work opposite that regional office. They actually work in a government offices. That is, we have adopted a so-called hybrid mode of operation. But the number of complaints and inquiries received was not high. Whether or not that location is good, we'll have to review it. Hakan? I have a last question for the ICAC.
With so much rentals paid for this kind of location, but with so few inquiries received, I think there is room for improvement. Now, basically, even in your website, ICAC website, when the public click into it, you only reveal your headquarters without the address of your regional offices. I just clicked in myself on my phone just now. So I think you should at least provide the addresses of your regional offices on your website. And I think it is quite unnecessary to pay monthly rentals of $83,000. Well, I don't think we need to raise our personal opinions here. We are really thinking about how we should go about compiling our report. Now, if you can give us more information concerning the value for money for 2008 to 2012, how much expenses was incurred, how many members of staff for each of the regional offices, and how many inquiries received. Let's say, was it 244 only for Hong Kong West? If you can give us a table with all that information, it would be very helpful. Now, this is not about whether business is good or not good in a particular regional office. Of course, you have education responsibilities as well, because the regional offices may have other functions other than receiving inquiries. So if you can just give us a detailed explanation concerning these regional offices, or if you call them your shops or branch offices, if you will, if you can just provide that kind of explanation and background, it would be good. If you can provide us with information as to the functions of the regional offices, that would be good. They are not there just for receiving inquiries and complaints, is that right? I don't want to approach this from a single angle only. Anything else, Mr. Chan Hakam? No. Leung Sing? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Since we do have some time, if we can just pursue on that particular issue. We don't want a lot of business, invariably, because this is like a doctor's clinic. If less patients there are, less sicknesses there are in a district, it is perhaps the better. It doesn't mean that low number of inquiries means problems. You can think about that. I'm looking at Gen 22, Appendix 1A, concerning the international convention, and the China had already been a signatory since 2009, and also the ICAC in Hong Kong have also referred to international practice in terms of prevention. Now, I'm looking at what page are you referring to? I'm looking at page 2 of this restricted confidential document about Clause 48 of the International Convention about mutual assistance in fighting or combating corruption cases and in enforcement. Well, I'm sure that the parties concerned will work together on enforcement. Now, I'm looking at the International Convention Clause 48 concerning the existing measures and legislation. Since we are a signatory to the International Convention through the country, and Hong Kong being a part of the country and the ICAC operating in this Hong Kong SAR, our relationship vis-a-vis the other signatories of the International Convention. My question is, are we able to handle all this relationship with the other signatory countries under Cap 204, which is the ICAC ordinance? Do we have sufficient resources to handle all those relationships with the signatories? Do we need further resources? Do we need to demarcate how many contacts with the signatories can we handle, or whether there are some enforcement actions, how we can assist in the signatory countries to make them effective. And in particular, in terms of mutual assistance for other jurisdictions, and in rendering assistance to other jurisdictions under the mutual legal assistance regime. And the international convention is very wide-ranging. Will you be coming up with certain demarcations as to the extent of assistance offered to other jurisdictions? So that is about a question about allocation of resources in light of value for money. Concerning this question, well, actually in the document it is already pointed out that if Hong Kong needs to, under the requirement of Article 48, fulfill certain requirements to assist other jurisdictions, then we will have to utilize this mutual legal assistance regime, which is a regime not set up by the ICAC, but rather the Hong Kong SAR government and other governments which have hammered out this or entered into this mutual legal assistance regime. And this is not unique to the ICAC, but rather where there is any mutual legal assistance needs arising among jurisdictions, this assistance rendering will arise. So this is not just covering the ICAC, but it pertains to other departments as well. And the ICAC does work on this on the platform of the mutual legal assistance regime, where rendering of assistance to other jurisdictions is required to combat corruption offenses. And we are looking at the response from the ICAC, para 43. Perhaps you can follow up from there. Yes, of course, there are a number of enforcement procedures, including investigation, extradition, etc. I understand all this work involved, but CAP 204 actually specifies the range of your work and the terms of reference, and every year there is an allocation of resources to carry out that work. And it has been 4 to 5 years since the accession to the international convention. It's been a few years. And the resources arising from this mutual legal assistance regime, would there be any need for adjustments? Would you need to make provisions, for instance, for rendering assistance under this regime? Because I do not see any allocation of resources for this purpose. Can you perhaps provide that information, either verbally or after the meeting, by writing? No, we are talking about investigations of corruption offenses in our combat, in our combating corruptions, and we are also referring to criminal offenses in other jurisdictions. And in the investigation of such cases, we will have to be working with the governments, other foreign governments. Perhaps there are witnesses or evidence concerning the case in residing in these overseas countries, or maybe the offender himself is located or situated in the foreign country. And in these instances, we will have to start the dialogue with the governments concerned, and perhaps we need their help or they may need our help in other cases, and we will be providing this kind of assistance to each other under this regime. And every year for the ICAC, we do have a large number of cases that we handle, and some of them are overseas related, international cases, and we will allocate our resources accordingly. We do not have a specific finite resource allocation for these cross-border cases. We don't. In fact, this kind of need does not arise only after the signing of the International Convention, but as early as the 1980s, or even in 1974, early on, when we extradited Godber. If you remember, we have started this kind of cross-border actions. In fact, this kind of the resources allocated to the resources for such actions are in our overall investigative resources. All right, Mr. Chairman, there is a very high-ranking official who said that Mr. Snowden is a spy of the People's Republic of China. And if so, then if that is indeed the case, then he would have received certain fees. And if the U.S. government would wish to extradite Mr. Snowden, then would the ICAC need more resources allocation to handle such a case? Well, to answer your question, this is not an ICAC case yet, and whatever the ex-vice president of the USA say is not really our business here. But from the response just now, the international cases, as mentioned by the Commissioner just now, they are explained in Head 72, and the expenses are all included in the normal investigative expenses. Now, for these ad hoc cases, I submit there may be more of these in the future. So for provisions for this kind of cases, for mutual legal assistance, I think these will be more frequent in the future. So if we can perhaps provide more explanation in the future. Now, concerning youth education, Mr. Chairman, I am looking at Gen 22. Strengthening youth education. What page are you referring to? Page 75, the handwritten page 75, Chinese version. Internal documents. Have you found the page, Mr. Commissioner? That's 11/2008. That's the document code. Now, for the strengthening of youth education against corruption, I think it's been going on for a number of years. This is really for the benefit of the young people in preparation for them to enter into society. And you would notice that in society there are a lot of these young problems with the youth.
They're engaged in such activities because of material temptation. Now, ethics education within schools, that's extended to many schools. So from the standpoint of value for money, you of course need more resources. Earlier, we had the national education incident. So if you conduct this sort of education, will you be alleged as doing brainwashing? Lansing? Well, if you cut expenses on this, because secondary and primary schools may be alleging that you're doing brainwashing. So I just want to know the proportion of resources that you are putting into this. That is for preventive education for the younger generation. Are resources sufficient, adequate or not? I'd like him to focus on the figures. So for this part of ethics education, are resources adequate? Well, for education for the younger generation, we had not encountered any resistance or hindrances. Director, every year in our budget for younger generations and ethics education, around $5 million, quite a huge portion, is channeled to ethics education, that is moral education, and youth education. Now, even kindergartens are covered. We have a cartoon coupled with TV episodes to be aired in schools. We place a lot of resources in secondary schools. We have produced a drama on anti-corruption. I think 300 to 400 schools have been using this drama. Apart from this drama, this year, to match the new senior secondary curriculum, we'll have a leadership training course for secondary students. And then we have the corruption prevention ambassadors, and we'll have a youth summit to be launched next year, which will be a biennial event. So quite a huge pool of resources have been placed on this because we attach a great deal of importance to education for young people. What's your overall budget? Well, for publicity and education is $10 million per year. And quite a great deal of resources have been put on media. For example, we have websites for young people, moral education websites, and preventive education websites for teachers and so forth. And teaching materials are also included. So if you add up all these resources, it's quite a lot. For moral education, C is dissemination of information to teachers. Do you have any information about the usage rate of teachers using your moral education materials? What about the effectiveness? 400 odd schools you mentioned. How many schools actually use your moral education materials for teachers? You mean website, promoting moral education through websites. We don't have the detailed figures here. As for the number of visits, every year it amounts to hundreds of thousands of visits. If you're referring to the ICAC moral education web, teachers can readily obtain information from that web. As our colleague said, you have 400 odd schools. If all of them use your resources, then it's good. But if none of them use your resources, then the effectiveness is 0. And then for B2, that is the formal paper that you submitted to us in relation to integrity and law abiding. Do you have any action to match the efforts of the government in relation to education? Or have you been evasive in your action? Take, for example, if the government says that Occupy Central is illegal, if the potential participants are told that resources would be given to them to employ lawyers, etc., to fight lawsuits, then what will you do? Social issues and students' experience will be used to design teaching materials. That's what you say in the paper. For youth education, you may be asked this question. What if an action or a campaign is lawful? Well, the ICAC does not do general education. They're only taking up anti-corruption, preventive education. When it comes to core values, even if it's brainwashing, it's all right. Integrity, fairness, and law abiding. Now, these are the major themes. If these are to be the major themes, then these are social issues and student experience, be it Hip-Yan or whichever school. Will you encounter difficulties in designing teaching materials? Will you evade certain issues? Or will you design special teaching materials? Well, Director, can you use your own way to answer his complicated question? We have a group of teachers to help us design the teaching materials. In fact, ICAC officers are not to teach the materials. It's the teachers who are teaching the materials, maybe during moral education classes. You see that this paper was prepared in 2008 for the Community Relations Advisory Committee. And after that paper, you can see another paper issued in 2009. Which paper? Are you also on Gen 22? In July 2009, was it handwritten? Page 91 of the Chinese version. That is paper 7/2009 in paragraph 7 and 6. You see that we've done something to meet the new senior secondary curriculum, and teaching materials had been revised in accordance with time and the latest developments. That's for the students. Langsing, maybe you can ask your questions in the education panel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your guidance. Let me ask about the ambassador scheme mentioned by the director. Now, that is a joint program with the tertiary institutions. Recently, 2 university vice-chancellors were appointed, but the students did not want them. Who recommends or recommend these ambassadors? What about the vice-chancellors of universities? If the students don't even accept the vice-chancellors themselves, how will they accept these ambassadors appointed by the vice-chancellors or presidents of universities? Director, how do you go about this ambassador program? Anything to do with the heads of the universities? Well, the ambassador program, the ICAC ambassador program, is a joint project with the Students' Affairs Office of universities. The universities will first identify those students who are interested, and they will conduct an interview before we select appropriate students to be ambassadors, ICAC ambassadors. Has she answered your question? Partially. But my question was, if eventually the vice-chancellors or presidents of the universities, that is the heads of the universities, are not accepted by the students, then the degree of acceptance of these ambassadors will be in question. Of course, you mentioned an interview, but if you have a vetting process, that will be more effective. Otherwise, the whole system will not be balanced. It will not be reliable. Well, this is just a piece of advice for your reference. Paul? Paul, yes, Paul first. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Chan's question. That's about the location of the office. If you look at Table 11, you'll see that just now we referred to the figures related to the regional officers. In 2008, for the number of reports, it took up 73% of the total. In 2012, that shot up to 81%. The figures remained stable from 2008 to 2012, but is actually declining. 27% dropping to 19% from 2008 to 2012. These are figures of the regional figures. As for the report center, is roughly 80% of the total. So is about 80 to 20 between the report center and regional offices. Apart from that ground floor premises that we just referred to, the ICAC is not a newly established body. Its offices do not have to be situated at very visible location before people know their existence. So is it really necessary to put these regional officers in expensive premises? Now, regional officers do not just accept reports. Of course, if you go back to 1974 when we were first established, the situation in society was very different. A lot of factors, including people, have changed since then. Back then, people did not want others to see they report corruption cases to the regional officers. So the regional officers were in rather invisible locations. Now, things have changed. Transport is convenient. Emails and telephone calls can be used to lodge complaints. So the number of people who lodge complaints at our report center has increased, amounting to 80% of the total number. As for the regional officers, I defer to the director for elaboration. regional officers, apart from accepting reports, what else do they do? Director, as the Commissioner said, a very important duty of a regional officer is to conduct preventive education. Regional officers join hands with the 18 district councils to organize activities and events. They also liaise with schools and organizations in the district concerned in the organization of activities. Of course, if members of the public want to inquire about laws, if they have questions or if they want to lodge complaints, our regional officers can also provide services to them. And precisely because of that, our regional officers had always been located on ground floor premises. However, the situation has changed. The Honourable Member mentioned the number of reports received by the report centre in the headquarters, as well as the number of reports received by regional officers is in the ratio of 8 to 2. So do we still need ground floor premises for regional officers? We can review that. But we have to retain the functions of the regional officers for, say, NT Northwest, NT Southwest. If we have our regional officers in North Point, it won't be financially or economically viable because transport expenses would be very expensive. But if you're talking about tea gatherings and other activities organized by us for the local communities, such activities will have to be organized in regional offices. So regional officers are important to us. Mr. Chairman, may I refer you to Gen 3, page 7 of the Chinese version, a written paper. Gen 3.
嗰度咧就朱議員或者你俾啲時間你揾翻個版先。
你等我揾咗先講。
Maybe we should give some time for the Commissioner to find out that paper. Gen 3, in 2010-11, 68 officers were deployed back to the headquarters, and then you adjusted your strategies. Only when necessary, they participated in the activities of the regional officers. So for face-to-face community activities, you mentioned a drop in number. You said that the demand has actually dropped. But that's contradicting what the Commissioner said. The Commissioner said that the best modus operandi is to have an ICAC office on every street. And just now, the Director explained why regional officers are no longer so badly needed, because emails, telephone calls, etc., can be used to lodge reports, complaints, or queries. Well, even display boards on the streets are very good resources for publicity and promotion. Well, we really envy your very big officers that they are not even entertaining one customer per day. Director, I don't think I can agree with the Honourable Member. Why? You can see that although in Gen 3 something is mentioned about regional officers, it doesn't mean that regional officers are no longer important. It's just that because of strategic changes, some officers have been transferred to the headquarters to do preventive education for young people and the local community. We still have education services but less ceremonies were organized. And normally, if there's no special ICAC issues, we may not attend the meetings of the advisory or consultative committees. Apart from routine ceremonies, we also have collaborative work with district councils, owners' corporations, and schools. Do you need ICAC officers to organize such activities, like contacting the ordinary citizens and organize preventive education activities? Can you use other facilities like community halls? I think councillors face the same problems when they organize activities. Their problems won't be less than those faced by the ICAC. If we have regional officers to serve the public, to us, resources can be better deployed to provide better services to the public. From another angle, can everybody station in the North Point headquarters and then go off to various activities in different parts of Hong Kong? Well, that's another angle to look at the issue. Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should ask for the rent paid by each regional office. Well, can we have the number of staff members, rent, etc., for all the regional offices in the past 5 years? We should also know how many cases have been handled by each regional office. I think regional officers are independent. So you should give us information, more information.
If we have time, if you will allow me a follow-up question. Gen 22, page 134. Which page again? Gen 22, page 134 of the Chinese version. Have you found the page, Mr. Commissioner? Yes. I think finally we have this form, this application form to leave Hong Kong for official business by the Commissioner, ICAC. And this is the document as copied here. This is 16th to the 23rd of May, 2010, by the then Commissioner, going to Beijing, Chengdu, and Sichuan. I would like to know, Mr. Commissioner, if you see this document, I would like to know who prepares this document on a normal basis. From my understanding, I think it would be the Commissioner's secretary who will be preparing this document for him. But of course, in so doing, the secretary will have to be in contact with the staff members or colleagues responsible for this particular visit. And then the relevant information will be forwarded to the Commissioner, who will sign and then forward that to the CE for approval. Now, we're looking at this document with the period 16th to 23rd of May 2010 mentioned. That's a total of 8 days. Would there be a supplementary document to specify that the visit had been shortened and will be sent to the CE? Well, I have no such experience myself, but I would think if the visit is shortened, then there should be another notification sent to the CE's office. Because during that time, another colleague will have to take up the post of the Commissioner during the time of absence of the incumbent. All right? If you look at page 118, the revised application, and because there was need to change the application, there was therefore a revised application. And that's very much like what Mr. Commissioner mentioned just now, page 118 and 119. You are referring to page 119? (119) I don't see. All right, I have it. And if you refer to 116, perhaps this is a clearer comparison. Again, it is a revised application. In the middle of the page, it's in the remarks, C has earlier given approval for me to attend the second IAACA. My itinerary has been rescheduled, hence the resubmission of my application. So that is to say, if there should be any rescheduling, there will be a new application, a revised application submitted. Now we're looking at the original application to Beijing, Chengdu, and Sichuan. This is the original application with no further applications, a revised application to supersede this one. Is that correct? No, not in the records, no. Well, does it mean then that this particular itinerary, this 8-day visit, had not been shortened, had not been changed in the mind of the Commissioner? I would say so, yes. In terms of arrangements, there are persons and entities which are listed in the purpose of visit, and I can, or persons or organizations to meet, and I can understand that this may not be the entire list as it finally turned out. Is that correct? Well, I cannot say so. I can only refer to the records. I do not have any other information. Yes, perhaps the director did participate in the visit, so perhaps it's more appropriate for her to answer the question. Can you please? Yes, Mr. Chairman. For the persons, organizations to meet, well, actually, the application has a shorter list than the list or the organizations that we actually visited. The contact address there, it says the Beijing Peninsula Wangfu Hotel. And that is a Beijing address, and it is not mentioned the Sichuan address or the Chengdu address as a contact address. Why have you omitted that, or is it not necessary to specify all the contact addresses? I think this is difficult to respond to because I have not seen this application form before. Our department is not responsible for filling out this form, but rather the personal assistant of the commissioner would fill in this form. Basically, my colleagues and my department would provide all the information concerning the visit to the organizations to visit and also the contact addresses. All right. So whether for yourself or your colleagues, when you apply or notify the commissioner, do you have to provide the contact address and the dates, etc., or do you just provide any contact address? No, usually we would have an itinerary, and we will list out the people that we meet on every day and the venue, and we will also list out where we stay. Paul? Mr. Chairman, if I may, if we can just continue to open up to this page, I would also draw your attention to another document, R60, Info 2, R60/7/Info 2. It's, let us find the document first. Do you have that document with you? Please, can somebody please help? Now, if it is convenient for you, if you can just turn to, let me see, the Chinese version, page 29, handwritten page number 29. There is no page 29. Yes, I have found it. If you can just refer to the bottom box concerning the date. 2010, May 16th to 23rd, the dates of the visit to Beijing, Chengdu, and Sichuan. Now, if you can count to the left two boxes, $17,574. Now, if I can just find the page first, Paul, hang on. Which page are you? Is it the number in the box, 29, or is it the page number? My page number goes up to 18 only. Do you have that page, Mr. Alan Lam? Have you found it, Mr. Commissioner? Yes, I have. Have we all found it? Well, proceed. This is about the breakdown of the expenses of the Commissioner. That's 17,574 RMB for the hotel, and also the air ticket 9,328. How many nights stay at the hotel is this 17,574 covered? Miss AU-YEUNG? Well, from this I understand that this is 7 nights and 8 days. I do not know whether this question is fair. If you do not remember, just say you do not remember. Director, you have been with the Commissioner on that trip all through the cities. Did the Commissioner join midway or left midway? Do you remember? As far as I remember, from the start of the official visit to arrival in Hong Kong, the Commissioner was with us. But can you provide the question again, Paul? The Commissioner, did he stay within the group all through the visit? He did not leave the group. Did he leave for a time during the visit, in the few days during the visit? Well, from my memory, when the Commissioner was in Beijing, he met up with us. No, I'm talking about this particular one. Now, I'm talking about this particular visit. I do not remember which particular visit it was. For this particular visit, whether we rendezvoused or met up in Beijing, I do not know. I have to go back and refer to the records. Yes, so Paul, she will refer to the records. Well, Mr. Chairman, my question is, did the group visit Jiuchai-go during this official visit? No, certainly not. In Sichuan, in fact, the Director for Prevention joined us only in Sichuan. As I have mentioned earlier in the last meeting, it is often not true that the entire group will go from Beijing to Sichuan. So, in fact, it was in Chengdu that we met up with the Director for Prevention. So you now say that you remember the visit described in page 134. Yes, because I have the information, but whether we left together, I do not remember. But on a Thursday, we flew from Beijing to Chengdu, and we met up with the head of prevention. And on that same evening, we were hosted to dinner by the mainland authority, and that was the Buddhist festival in Hong Kong. And because Hong Kong supported to the tune of 2 billion Hong Kong dollars the reconstruction of or rebuilding of Sichuan after the earthquake, and there was this highway which was supported by that Hong Kong funding. And the head of prevention actually went to see that highway, and after that there was a discussion with the relevant department, the mainland department, and we have heard their report, to hear their report. And while in Sichuan, they actually advanced the meeting with us on the Friday evening. So, in fact, we were really rushed for time. We went to the highway, saw it, and immediately went back to the meeting with the department. And for the next day, because the meeting was cancelled and the Luoshan secretary wasn't, he very much wanted us to see Luoshan, and therefore, as host, he hosted us and brought us to the Luoshan big Buddha, carved Buddha, and therefore we did go, and after that we left Sichuan on the next day. Well, the director seems to remember the visit very clearly, and I think you know about a report in Mingpao, and therefore you have gone back to the records, and therefore you can come up with so many details. Well, what I said was the actual fact with detailed records. And Mr. Chairman, if I can just follow up with the next question. Director, do you remember premiere or gala premiere for movies by, mounted by the ICAC? Yes, annually. In 2009 and 2011, we had these gala premieres. Well, what would the arrangement be for the tables, for instance? Given the restrictions, only targeted persons were invited. Or is it true that the commissioner can decide that a table or certain seats be reserved for his family members? Well, basically, we organize a premiere at the Kowloon Convention Center, and it's like going to a cinema. And there are no tables at the cocktail preceding the premiere. There were just a cocktail, and everybody just went into the movie house after the cocktails. So it's not a dinner. There's no sit-down dinner with tables. Is that right? No, not at all. Oh, that's just for clarification. Thank you very much. Mr. Allen Leung? Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned about Mr. Tong, the then commissioner. There were 34 overseas visits during his tenure, 33 visits totaling $4 million in expenses. And we are talking about value for money. There's $4 million. What kind of effect did it generate? And in particular for Hong Kong in promoting the culture, has there been any benefit at all for prevention of corruption in Hong Kong? I'm looking at these overseas visits and the application by the Commissioner to the CE, the documents referred to by Mr. Paul Chair, Jan 22, page 115 onwards to page 140. Are you referring to the 34 visits totaling $3.9 million expenses? Gen 14, actually. There's a table, Gen 14. And in that table is listed the 33, I'm sorry, it's not 34, 33 visits, I correct myself, overseas visits, with 3.83 million plus spent. That's Gen 14, page 1100. I'd like to ask, for these 33 visits listed here, with the Commissioner applying to the CE for approval, I'm also referring to Gen 22, page 115 onwards to page 148, these application forms. I'd like to know from the Commissioner, for this kind of application, is it necessary even now, for instance, for yourself, Mr. Pei, if you are going on an overseas visit, do you have to fill in a similar form and send it to the CE for approval? Yes, correct. And since you assumed office, how many such forms have you filled in? If I remember correctly, 5. From the angle of value for money in order to promote the culture of cleanliness and bribery or corruption prevention, from this angle, we're looking at the records of these 33 visits. From your point of view, as the incumbent commissioner, would you go on these visits, in your view?
After my assumption of office, I had 5 such duty visits with a purpose every time. In terms of nature, of course, I have only taken up this post for less than a year only. So in terms of pattern, there's a slight difference between my visits with the 43 visits conducted by Mr. Tong. Of course, I cannot say anything on his behalf. Insofar as I'm concerned, in 2006, China became a signatory to the UN Convention. Will it be because of that there's a growing need for duty visits elsewhere, that is outside Hong Kong? Would there be such a need? For me, as at present, there's no such great demand. Mr. Leung, for the 43 visits outside Hong Kong, if I counted correctly, for 23 visits, the Director of Community Relations accompanied the Commissioner. I remember that during the last session of this hearing, Ms. Mu told us that she was not the Commissioner for, she was not yet the Director of Community Relations. So on how many of those visits were you the Director of Community Relations? When did you take up the present post? October 2008. All right, October 2008. That means before October 2008, when the post title Director of Community Relations appear? That's not you. No. We arrange these application forms in chronological order. So, for the one on page 74 of the Chinese version, it takes us up to page 5 of that series before the Director of Community Relations was you. Well, on page 4, I was with the Commissioner on the Ukraine visit. All right. So if I counted correctly, for 18 of those visits, you accompany the Commissioner. On page 4, for the second last item, you got 4 before. So altogether, on 18 visits, you were with the Commissioner. So if we count from the Ukraine visit, then given the value for money concern, when Mr. Tong went on such visits, was it really effective to attain the anti-corruption goals or objectives? How would you assess the effectiveness of the visits? Director, from a macro point of view, you can see that for those visits outside Hong Kong, to a great extent, they were conducted as a result of the UN Convention. We participated in conferences and spoke at those conferences. So we're one of the designated regulatory bodies. We had exchanges with the other signatories of the UN Convention. So from that angle, I see a need to go on such visits. Mr. Chairman, when I went through the checklist, I did observe that they did join expert meetings, etc., etc. But not all those visits include meetings or conferences. Let me see. Give me a moment. In 2009, may I refer you to paper Gen 14, page 5 of the Chinese version. The third box from the top, you see China, Beijing, Kunming, and Lijiang. From the 11th to the 17th of January 2009, altogether a week inclusive. How is this related to what you mentioned as obligations in relation to anti-corruption? It seems that there's no correlation. Director, the Procuratorate, as you can see, under the UN Convention, will have a joint meeting, and the chairman was the director of the Procuratorate. So all the three departments, that is prevention, operations, and community relations, will join to have exchanges. So for this Beijing visit, unless we're not going to work at the international level and at the mainland level, such visits would be meaningful and necessary. Just now, well, let's go back to the application form submitted by the then Commissioner, Mr. Timothy Tong. Jan 22, page 122. Have you found that? Application date, the date of Mr. Tong's signature, the 5th of January 2009, 36 days before the visit commenced. Do you see the date? Director, do you see the date? And then CE's vetting 5 days before the visit commenced. The 6th of January 2009. For most of these forms, they're assigned a few days or a week before the commencement of the visit. That is when the CE's approval was sought. Did they envisage that the CE might not approve the application? Well, they had made arrangements to meet with high-ranking officials. Well, if approval was not given, it would be very embarrassing. Well, that's not under the portfolio or ambit of the Community Relations Department. The Commissioner has dedicated staff to fill out these forms and make all the arrangements. My guess is that the Commissioner notified the CE in advance of the visits. Well, Mr. Pei, you have filled out 5 such forms concerning the CE's vetting process. Is it a genuine vetting process or just a routine? Commissioner, my understanding is that it is genuine vetting because the CE's approval has to be obtained. If he does not approve, then we'll have to cancel the visit. Mr. Chairman, now when Mr. Pei, the Commissioner, lodges such an application, will he allow more time between the application and the commencement of the visit? Commissioner? Generally speaking, the other party may change their plan. So normally we would wait till nearer the time when we know that the itinerary will not change before we submit an application. If you ask me whether a week is appropriate, if you ask me, then of course I'll say the longer the time, the better. Alan? Commissioner, for the 5 forms filled out by you, how many days in advance you filled out the applications? I can't remember. Can you give us the information after the hearing? Mr. Chairman, because when I read the application forms, I found something strange. In certain cases, the applications were approved 1 day or 2 days ahead of the visit. Now I'm going back to Jan 22 for the LIAW visit. Only officials of Yunnan province and Beijing are included. I don't see any officials from LIAW or Kunming. Is it that Yunnan officials cover officials of Kunming and LIAW? Can the director assist us in this regard? Director, as I did not join the last part of the visit, well, I only joined the Beijing part. Yet, I can see from the information here that they went to Lijiang in Yunnan. They had visited the Yunnan province procuratorate and the Lijiang municipal government. For these application forms to be submitted to the CE, do you need to set out all people to be met by the commissioner? For me, I'll try to give as many details as possible. Well, let me come back to this Lijiang visit. Director, on page 125, a number of officials were set out. Are these all in Beijing and Yunnan? They cover the procuratorate and security officials, as well as the Hong Kong-Macau office, with the China Science and Technology Academy, as well as the law reform officials. So that means the application form does not require all officials to be set out. Then according to the practice of Mr. Pei, there are omissions if he didn't. That means the former commissioner did not fill out all officials. The CE would not detect those omissions. If you only read the application forms as well as our file records, then you can see a difference. We recorded more institutions than those set out on the application form. Alan? Well, I don't know whether you know this or not. If you don't know, just tell us. That's in January 2009. When the former commissioner filled out the application form, should he not include everybody to be met by him? Director, I really don't know how to fill out the form. Alan, just now she already said that it was not she who filled out the form. Yes, I know, Mr. Chairman. I asked about these two papers because I would like to understand more before I draw any conclusion in future. What I'm saying is that should the CE also be held responsible to a certain extent when he vetted such applications in future? If we are to criticize Timothy Tong, the former commissioner, we may be entitled to criticize Donald Tsang as well. Well, I think I can't find out any more from her here. Well, we can extend our meeting for half an hour. Do you have time? Mr. Pei, Commissioner, do you have time? Do you have time? Who can continue? Leung Sing?
有咁多次有冇？
Well, has the CE ever not approved the applications? Are you asking about the time when Mr. Tong was commissioner? Yes. Well, I really do not know, Mr. Chairman. You know, for the ones that I have arranged, they have all materialized. Well, have you ever arranged a visit, but the commissioner told you that the CE did not approve and therefore we had to cancel? No, it's not happened, but there was one time when the commissioner had to attend the international anti-corruption convention to be held in Eastern Africa. It was a very important executive committee meeting, but the then commissioner was not able to attend because there was no approval, and I led the delegation. Can you perhaps give us a date so that we can refer to the relevant information and seek information also from the CE's office? I think it was in 2012. I'm not sure, but yes, can you please provide us with the date afterwards so that we can ask the CE's office? Gen 22, yes, Gen 22, page 99, handwritten 99, concerning the community consultation meeting. This is a document about mainland work conducted by the ICAC, forward-looking. And it says after the resumption of sovereignty, the two areas have stepped up their liaison, and the ICAC will have to, according to the changing situation, be forward-looking in their policies and the planning of work going forward. And this is a consultation for the community and also the members' opinions expressed here. I will not go into the content except for point 5. And I see that it says the central government had changed from a harsh punishment approach to a more preventive approach. And perhaps this is where the ICAC can provide more help and assistance. Point 5. Exactly. Concerning the double-barreled strategy of corruption, punishment, and prevention. I would like to know whether you have, after this kind of new strategy, have you allocated new resources or made new allocation with existing resources given the changing nature of work? Well, basically, the members supported and adopted this paper, and therefore we have continued with our mainland liaison work. Mr. Chairman, I do not know whether it is convenient to ask the following question, whether there's any verbatim records of your members' opinions voiced at the meeting. I think it would be very helpful in understanding the situation over the allocation of resources, any addition or contraction. Well, we do have minutes. And as far as I remember, there were not a lot of members who expressed opinions on this particular item, but we do have minutes to the meeting. We can provide the minutes after the meeting. Yes, you can black out the names and perhaps provide this particular part of the minutes to us only. Yes, that's all I want to know at this point. Anybody else? Paul? Alan? Anybody else? Chen Ka-kei? No? Yes, perhaps Mr. Pei, the Commissioner, would want to spend 5 to 10 minutes to wrap up, and then we will wrap up after that. Mr. Pei, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a conclusion remark. First of all, I would like to thank the Audit the Director of Audit in providing the preventive education enlisting public support against corruption. Well, this is exactly the 3 prongs that we use in combating corruption by the ICAC. This audit exercise had presented us with a very good opportunity for the ICAC to review and look at the work that we have done in these 3 areas and to plan forward. We completely accept the report, and in particular in the hosting and entertainment activities, we will conduct comprehensive review, and also in terms of expenses for entertainment and also the separation into several bills, we have come up with the following. First of all, for any such entertainment fees for official banqueting, if it exceeds the upper limit for expenses, there will have to be a special approval by the Commissioner. And secondly, should there be any expenses incurred before or after an event, for example, wine or desserts and snacks, etc., they would have to be included into the main bill, and it would strictly forbidden to segregate into separate bills. And also the Director of Audit had also pointed out for OCs as well as other organizations organizing talks and publicity events in combating corruption, there is a decrease there, and we understand that to continue to conduct the work with less staff, the Community Relations Department will look at the overall resources and with a view to raising the effectiveness and efficiency. And in liaising with the community and also using the media to promote the culture and message of anti-corruption, we have been using these tools and we have been meeting the targets. And in that process, for various organizations, the students included, we have been able to reach over 740,000 persons. And also we have been trying to move with the times and provide the right channels, methods in meeting the demands and needs of the various sectors. And in the past few years, we have also used multimedia channels, including TV programs or dramas with over 1 million viewership. And in 2010, for websites, the total number of visits had been over 4 million. And also for social media, YouTube, Facebook, we are also utilizing these media to promote our message in an effort to be more cost effective. Again, I would like to thank the members of the Audit Committee and providing us with the opportunity to explain the work of the ICAC and provide the information to LIAW members. And we have tried our very best and utilized a lot of staff resources in reviewing and digging up relevant historic information for LIAW members' reference. And we would want to thank you for that opportunity. Well, Mr. Pei, for the information, they will be referred to in our report. If you believe there's anything that is sensitive, would you please let us know? But all the information will be provided in our report. Well, thank you very much, colleagues from the government audit, and thank you, colleagues from the ICAC, and I don't think we will need another meeting soon.